Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the, fourth part of our foundational learning webinar series. I'm Steph Smith with the National Community Action Partnership. And today's goal of the webinar is learning the basics of why your community action agency would want to build capacity for your ET program. Our good friends at Seattle Job Initiatives, Bob and Susan, will be presenting today's webinar. And we are presented by the amazing, or joined rather by the amazing Teresa with TriCap to help bring what we're going to talk about into a real world situation. So this webinar is recorded. That and the slides will be available shortly. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Bob and Susan. Thanks.
Thanks, Steph. Hello, everyone. Just to go over a few, before we get started, go over a few kind of housekeeping rules. Please keep your microphones on mute during the presentation. Feel free to unmute if you have a question, but we urge you to use the chat function to put your questions in during the presentation. If you want to keep your cameras on, feel free to do that. It's good to see your faces. And then if you would, just so we know what organization you're from, you can go in and rename yourself so that when we see your face, we know, again, your name and the organization that you're with. You can do that by clicking on the three dots next to your name and then select rename. And again, like Steph said, the presentation is going to be recorded and the slide deck will be available for you as soon as it's posted and shared. Next slide. So like Steph said, this is the fourth in the webinar series. Just kind of remind you about, when we provided those other topics during the webinar series. Again, if you've missed any of these, then they've been recorded, so they are available for you to look at later on if you want to. Next slide. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to do a quick recap of SNAP ET and some of the things we covered in the past, and then explain why we need to kind of build our capacity in the SNAP ET program, why we're reporting things that we're reporting, and kind of what capacity is going to be needed in order to verify SNAP ET participation and eligibility. And then talk a little bit about compliance and then the invoicing process that you need to build capacity for, and then how to think about building the desired capacity with your community action agency. Then we're going to get some real world information and best practices from Teresa Flink from TriCap Minnesota, and then we'll get into a Q&A session and us actually going to do a couple Slido polls with you guys to get some information from you, let you give us some feedback. Next slide. So again, as a reminder, one of the things we talked about last time was assessing your funding, and that is, it is entirely connected to building your capacity, because you need to do, this is part of what you need to do to kind of, assess your situation in your agency and figure out, where you're going to need to look at your capacity building and whether or not you already have the capacity to do this work. So again, with your revenue, looking at what revenue you have coming in your organization, the non-federal income that you get, and then the fact that it's not tied to another federal program that you need to match to. And then looking at your activities and how they are, the costs that you have and the services you provide. And then, of course, your participants and the folks that are going to be eligible for SNAP ET. So again, all this goes into deciding and looking at what your capacity needs to be. Next slide. So again, another reminder about what a third-party partnership is. It's an agency that will contract with the SNAP agency in your state. They're also referred to as a third-party reimbursement program or 50-50 partnership. Again, the services, the SNAP ET services are provided by that third party, such as your organization. And then you can be reimbursed up to 50% with federal funding for the services you provide. And as long as you pay for those services with non-federal funds, then you would be eligible for that 50% reimbursement. Next slide. And then again, another reminder about the third-party elements and how they kind of all fit together and all play a part in making sure that you get the most out of the SNAP ET program, and looking at your program, your services, the funding that you get. And again, today we're looking at building your capacity so that you get the most out of the program. So in referencing the USDA Food Nutrition Service SNAP ET Operations Handbook, it describes the capacity of a third-party partner as, having that financial stability. In other words, during the contract period or the program year, making sure that the funding that you get is stable throughout that program year, and not only stable, but also that it's sustainable. It's something that you can count on during the whole program year to sustain your program. And then a good record of if you have experience with other federal or state contracts, what your experience has been, how well you've run those programs. And then your ability to meet the contract requirements when you're contracting with the SNAP agency for providing SNAP ET services. You want to make sure that you can meet all those requirements. And again, I think as you're going to see, a lot of this is going to be things you're already doing, and you're going to be able to integrate this into the programs you're already doing. We've also put a link to that SNAP ET Operations Handbook at the bottom of this slide, which again, you'll have access to when we put this out there. Then, how should you be thinking about capacity at this point? Well, you definitely need to, understand what's expected of you as an ENT partner. You need to make sure that your staff are, have the ENT knowledge so that they can all work together to make this work correctly. And then think about how ENT is really a capacity building in itself. In other words, the 50% reimbursements that you get, you can reinvest into the program and help build your capacity even more to run the program better. What we don't want you to do is think about hiring new staff to be solely focused on SNAP ET. And I'll even take it a step further and say, you don't want to think about building programs specifically for SNAP ET. Again, you want to think about what you're already doing and how, and the people you're already serving, and think about how this can be, built in and integrated with SNAP ET. Next slide. So when we think about capacity, one of the aspects of that is data and reporting, and what that consists of is with your participants that you have in your program, how you do that assessment with them, how you build the employments with them. So again, the main focus of this and the main purpose is to make sure that they're have the training and skills they need to become gainfully employed. Again, your capacity is a part of serving participants is to track their progress in the different activities that they're doing. Are you taking case notes and being able to track that progress? And then component activity, and we're talking the SNAP ET components, things like tracking when they start in a different activity, when they stop, and then ultimately what the outcomes are. Did they complete the activity, and was there an employment placement as a result of that activity? Next slide. So why do we need to report ENT services? Well, the USDA does require that ENT participation information, certain information from states, and of course they have to answer to Congress, and because Congress provides them the money. So they need to know that what programs are working, and they also need to know how many participants they have in the program. And this is very important when they allocate the money to the states, because it is a formula grant, and part of that is knowing how many people are actually participating in the program in that state. And then of course the state, in order to receive those federal funds, they really need to submit those detailed reports. And because the third-party partner is part of their program, they really depend on the third-party partner to track certain data and that report it to the state, the SNAP agency, so they can in turn report it to the USDA. Next slide. So this is kind of a sample roster exchange that would go between the third-party provider and the SNAP agency. And what this shows here is a list of potential participants that will be in the program, and then listing when they were actually confirmed as SNAP eligible, in other words, eligible for SNAP E&T, the dates that they were confirmed, how long their certification period was for SNAP, so they can kind of keep track of, you know, when they might lose their eligibility for SNAP. And then, of course, there's two different aspects of participants that they want to know about, whether or not they're able-bodied adults without dependents, or if they're work registrants that are non-ABOD. So again, just an example of what the reporting might look like. Next slide. So the other aspect of it is the administrative and fiscal part of the reporting, or the capacity. In other words, how well you can document the supportive services that you provide your participants, and how, and whether or not they are funded properly. And the federal funds management basically is making sure that the federal funds that you're claiming or trying to get reimbursement for, that they're for eligible services. And then that you can make sure that you have the capacity for audits and monitoring, because those are expected throughout the program year. And then that you can budget your program. In other words, look at past performance and understand what you might be possibly using to draw down the federal reimbursement. And then your invoicing process to make sure you can properly track your expenses and that you're invoicing only expenses that are eligible for SNAP E&T reimbursement. Next slide. So this is just kind of a partial list of things that you might think about when preparing for an audit or contract monitoring. There's two different kind of categories that they look at. One is the program side of it, and the other is the fiscal side of it. Under the program, they're looking at how well you track, again, individual participation, and how well you manage those cases for your participants. And again, looking at what kind of materials and briefings you do with those participants, things like getting participant releases so that you can share information with the SNAP agency and vice versa. Employability assessments and making sure they get notified of their civil rights. Again, the support services, making sure you're tracking those participant reimbursements, and then a record of any benefits that they might receive as far as SNAP, and making sure that they're eligible for, they continue to be eligible for SNAP E&T. And then on the fiscal side is making sure you're tracking those eligible expenses and using non-federal dollars to pay for those expenses, and then proof that the expenses that you're doing are reasonable and necessary for the person to participate in SNAP E&T. And of course, track, making sure you have the receipts and everything.
I think we lost Bob for a moment, so I'm gonna step in. So Bob was saying, that these are just some good kind of basic elements of what gets covered in an audit or contract monitoring, and some things that you might want to consider when you're preparing and building out your capacity to support that. I'm going to move on. Hopefully Bob hops back on, but I'll just kind of take over. I was going to step in pretty soon anyway. So kind of speaking to the invoicing process and what that looks like, sort of jumping back, referring back to that aspect of capacity. This kind of shows, this is an example that would reflect a program that's offering maybe two different kind of sub-programs or having two different sites that have eligible expenses to invoice for. And so, this shows like a couple of columns with the actual expenses, so the actual kind of non-federal expenditures in the full value of that. And then it shows down here these lines where you can factor in what your reimbursement would be. So you had a total cost of $161,000, and then you can expect $80,628 to come back as 50% reimbursement. Just an example, invoices look different for every program. So just kind of to give you an idea of what that looks like. Bob, do you want to take over? Would you like me to?
I apologize. I haven't had much luck with Zoom this week. I don't know. It just keeps kicking me off. I think it might be my internet. So anyways, sorry about that. So just looking at some best practices for looking at your staffing and task assignments, make sure you distribute your task across. When you're looking at building your capacity, make sure you distribute task across the roles that your staff members can coordinate those tasks. Don't try to, put all this on one person. Again, the whole idea is to try to integrate this into what you're already doing and the tasks your staff are already doing. So you don't want to, it creates less of a burden that way. And then integrate your, well, go ahead. That's fine. Yeah, the only thing I was going to say about this was making sure that you write your processes down. And this is, of course, because if you have turnover in your staff or people take vacations or whatever, you want to make sure those processes are down so that somebody can take over in case there is a gap. Go ahead, next slide. Most states or SNAP agencies, if they have a good viable SNAP ET program, will have a handbook for providers. So it's always good to refer to those and make sure that if you have any questions, ask those up front. Make sure there's a good understanding of what the reporting requirements are and what your expectations are, like we said before, under those contracts. Establishing a good point of contact is very good to do, making sure that you have a person that you can depend on at the SNAP agency that you can ask questions to, making sure you review what the processes are so that you can have a good streamlined avenue for your data management and reporting requirements. And then meet regularly with your SNAP and SNAP ET agency to make sure that, again, there's good communication, good coordination between the processes. Again, it makes building that capacity a lot easier. Next slide. And I think this was where you take over anyway, Susan.
Yep. Thanks, Bob.
All right.
So I'm going to go over, some best practices for, your management to think about how you kind of build out good systems, good internal processes. It really is all about making sure that you have a kind of a shared stated, understanding of the vision for SNAP ET among your leadership. So sometimes, things are happening sort of in the implementation world, making sure leadership understands why this is an important program and that they're really sharing that vision and putting forth that vision through their leadership. And you want to make sure that managers have a process to manage and monitor staff ET activities on an ongoing basis. So you really want to have leadership engaged in understanding how SNAP ET is operating and the performance throughout the month, not just at the time of invoice. So it's really about being on top of what's going on, not just at the point of, oh gosh, we have to go submit an invoice now, but doing some internal checking for quality and making sure that you're ready to be submitting those invoices. And integrate SNAP ET into ongoing conversations and follow up with your staff in one-on-one team meetings and conversations. You might have frontline staff they're doing their work and it's part of SNAP ET, but they may not be really thinking about SNAP ET in their work, day-to-day work, because they're working with people. And this is sort of, a funding mechanism that kind of operates in the background and gives you the capacity to do this work. But it's important that those staff understand what elements of SNAP ENT they're performing. And then that kind of goes into best practices for frontline staff. So again, train your staff, develop effective training materials to help your staff understand why they're doing what they're doing and what they're doing. So they have that understanding, so they know that, the work they're doing needs to be tracked in maybe a specific way, or specific elements of the services they're offering need to be tracked in a specific way, and have them bought into why that's happening. And, sometimes it is just a conversation of, this is how we are funding and bringing in resources to do this great work and to help the people that we're serving. Creating a process and documenting the processes for your staff to execute these activities is really important. Some of those elements are that you want to document are, how participants are supported, how you report on those activities, and then again, how you invoice for it and ensure fiscal compliance. Really, the name of the game here is understand the process and then document it, so all your staff understand what role they play. So this is an example of kind of a training schedule that you could create as you're becoming a provider. So thinking about, like, as you're getting prepared, as your contract is going to start and you begin offering services, you might want to consider kind of building out staff training to coincide with that. So everybody's ready to go. What needs to happen and when as things start. Because everything is sort of cyclical, you want to be sort of prepared for that from the get-go. So staff aren't caught off guard when they're all of a sudden called upon to submit case notes maybe, or have certain pieces of documentation ready in participant files or that sort of thing. So this left-hand column kind of outlines what your kind of curriculum, if you might call it, or just how you framework for training your staff could have. So make sure your staff understand SNAP ENT, be consistent in having your organization understand the program. Again, if you're working in multiple sites, there's a really, big need to do this, or if you have partners who are playing a specific role. And then making sure that your staff are sharing best practices and ready to share this, even within your CAP agency network throughout NCAP. Once you become a provider, you will be looked at amongst your network as an expert who can kind of share best practices. So I'm going to shift gears here a little bit, and we're going to share a tool or process guide that we've created recently at SJI that helps programs do a couple things. One is just mapping their services and understanding what they do and how it aligns with SNAP ENT. And it also helps you determine sort of where you might have, capacity gaps, or where you might just need to understand how roles are going to be played and who needs to do what when you operate a SNAP ENT program. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment, and I'm going to share our program mapping tool and go over that with you. This is a tool that will be made available to you all to kind of use in your process. So I will stop sharing that, and I will share our mapping tool. Can everybody see my screen? I will make this a little bit bigger. Somebody can give me a heads up so that I know I'm good here. Whoops.
Yes, we see
All
it.
set, yep.
Okay, great. 1 second. I lost it though on my screen. So there we go. So we developed this tool to really support organizations that were starting to consider whether SNAP ENT was a good fit for their program, and to give, or if they were going to embark on a new contract, to really understand what would be in the scope of their SNAP ENT contract. So this is kind of a step-by-step process. There's 2 steps here that help you understand. So the first step is, becoming familiar with SNAP ENT components and services. And we've shared this type of information in our previous sessions where, what are the SNAP ENT components and services that are offered in the SNAP ENT program. And then how would you match what you do and align it along those components, especially knowing that your services are probably named something different than what those components are. And then you want to identify what adjustments or steps do you need to take? Again, going back to the staff training piece to make sure that you're ready to administer those services along the lines of SNAP ENT. So a couple things to consider, and we've talked about this before, SNAP agencies don't always offer the full menu of SNAP ENT components that are allowed in the regulations. So it's important to know kind of what the SNAP ENT program looks like in your location. And it's not necessarily a deal breaker, or and it's not a problem if your program and services are funded with a mix of federal and non-federal funds. There's processes to kind of isolate what's allowable and what you would be invoicing for and what's not. And also you're likely to be serving a mix of SNAP ENT and non-SNAP ENT participants within this sort of umbrella of allowable services. And again, we talk about that when you're assessing your funding, how to kind of isolate for what's eligible. And then as you move through this tool, this is an example of how you would do this assessment. So, lining up what the SNAP ENT components are, writing down what your corresponding program or services are kind of in relation to these SNAP ENT components, and then noting what sort of adjustments or training or next steps you need to do. So this third column is really the capacity piece. Like where you have capacity gaps? What do you need to do to just sort of ensure that you're doing the right things to administer SNAP ENT appropriately? And then the last piece of this tool is a fillable document, so you can actually go through and in those first 2 steps and actually do this work. So this might be a helpful tool when you're working in the cohort to kind of assess your feasibility, line up your services, and then start seeing where you need to address either capacity gaps or just ensure that you've got the right people kind of assigned to the right roles in your program. Again, we'll make this available to you all to use. So I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to go back to our slideshow. Allow me 1 moment to hop back onto our presentation. I believe you all are back on our slides. Oops. So let me see. So I'm going to hand this over to your peer and fellow cohort participant, Teresa Flink from TriCap, Minnesota, who's going to address some, topics around capacity and share her experience with how they have built their SNAP ENT capacity. So Teresa, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Very happy to be here today. And I interjected on several of these sessions in the past about our experiences at TriCap, as we've had this program for several years now and really have learned a lot along the way about the process and what works best, and so that you all don't have to make the same mistakes that we have. But that's always our joke. As far as, talking about capacity, before we even started this process, when we were looking at applying for this grant, we looked at what we call a strategy screen, which is what we do to look at any grants that we're considering. And the strategy screen just really goes through the feasibility of adding this program. And in this case, it's not really adding a program. For us, it was utilizing our existing programming. And then the capacity would be around some education around the program, some training components for both, all levels of fiscal, management, and then direct line staff. And so as we analyzed it and as we looked at what we were actually doing at that time and how it was a good fit, we started moving forward and decided to go ahead and submit our application. What I have talked to, I think you all in the past about is that I really love that this is it's non-competitive grant. The more the merrier, and there's a lot of support and guidance around the program to help agencies get started, including a lot of support amongst our own CAP agencies. We work really well together. We help one another out. We've always, traditionally done that. And so this is an opportunity for agencies to tap into a revenue source that's just, provides discretionary funding, which is, not always easy to come by. So one of the strategies that we used is we used looked at our non-federal grants. So we identified the grant opportunities that we would kind of have as our starting point. So existing clients within our housing, asset, and workforce areas. And so we operate a few state programs, transitional housing, as well as long-term homeless. So those were key matches right there. In the workforce pillar, which is what I oversee at TriCap, we operate what's formerly known as the Displaced Homemaker. Now it's called the Minnesota Family Resiliency Partnership. So we work with homemakers who are transitioning into employment, increase in income in their households to self-sustain after a divorce, separation, death, or disability of a spouse. And so that was another key program that we're already doing pre-employment. So it made sense to, that a majority of our clients would actually come from that program. And that has traditionally been the case. We also wanted to keep the program pretty simple and look at how to incorporate it into the workforce, housing, and asset pillar, but keeping it as simple as possible for staff to understand what we're doing here. And as far as their involvement goes, they're already working with the clients. And so they don't have to do a lot of reinventing the wheel. Their case management looks pretty much the same because employment's always a part of housing programs. It's always a part of asset programs, and it's always a part of workforce. So that just made perfect sense for us. The focus on growth over time, starting out in increments. So we kept it really small at the beginning, almost kind of seemed laughable to look at, okay, we're going to identify 30 clients. But I've also seen other programs that start too big. And then they're like, oh, that was a little much. So looking at, the capacity and maybe thinking about starting out smaller with a focus on growth over time. And then considering the reverse referral process. I know there's a lot of different ways to set this up, but that was an option for us that kept it very simple. And I think, you don't want to complicate this. The fiscal buy-in piece, just looking at initially, I think fiscal, they're not used to this sort of concept of reimbursement, to be honest, and not in this way. And then they also had to kind of wrap around, we had to create like a different process. So I do a monthly reimbursement request that's pretty basic. I just plug in a bunch of numbers. It's all a bunch of formulas based on a percentage of clients that we have. And then that is reviewed. So we have, several different people reviewing, and it's sent over to finance. So it's something I do every month as part of my work. Keep it easy, keep it simple, and understanding that at the end of the fiscal year, you don't need to spend down, because that is something that a lot of agencies, they're used to grants where, they've set a certain amount of money, and then at the end of the fiscal year, that has to be spent out, right? And so with this, you're requesting, as you go on those allowable expenses. And so if your budget is such that, you at the end of the year haven't quite gotten to where you want to be, that's okay. And even within our state of Minnesota, we have the opportunity to go above as well. And so, yeah, I think that it's important to know that, that we can not have that sort of pressure that sometimes, comes with spend down of grants at the end of the fiscal year. So that's different than what I think many of our grants are, how they're set up. So in terms of building capacity, we had a lot of guidance along the way from the state to show us, take a look at our tools. Does this make sense? Can you help us through this process? And they were very much involved from the beginning, and they are with all of the programs and helping them onboard. So they have meetings with Fiscal, they meet with the, direct line and management staff to really make sure that, we are able to set this up in such a way. And we in Minnesota have a really great team at DHS that really believe in this program, and they believe in the providers, and they're very supportive. So, we discussed auditing just a little bit earlier. We do an internal monitoring process. We have always done that. So again, utilizing and tapping into what you're already doing. And we use that system. They have tools at the state that they provide us to monitor cases. So they have a tool with a checklist, and it's a really good training tool for the staff, because then they get to see what is the expectation that the monitors will have when monitoring season happens. For us, it's monitoring season right now. And so for workforce programs, at least. And so, yeah, we start that process internally and take a look at those cases and do our checks and balance system. Of course, internal monitoring happens throughout the whole fiscal year, because I'm always looking at cases, casework, just to make sure that we're, following the protocol and the requirements with the state. There's so much flexibility, but there are just some basics that we need to kind of take a look at. So those are some of the key components with audits. Actually, with this year, I think they're auditing cases that are over 150,000 in requests. So a lot of the programs, they typically monitor that fiscal side, but they're always monitoring that, because every month we are sending in the request and they get to see the backup documentation, they get to see what we're doing. So they're always monitoring in that way. So that's good too. That helps us learn as well. So, and then as far as staff training goes, again, with your state ENT oversight, they should have a process for onboarding and getting programs set up. And if they don't, Minnesota has a great one that at least we can borrow from. And you can take a look at the onboarding tools that they have, and the process that they actually set up for new staff training. And then we're able to utilize and tap into those tools, their program guidance. Of course, that is something I give to every direct line staff to review. And it's really well laid out. But I also incorporate a procedure for each and every program that I oversee, and making sure that it's, the most important points are pulled out of that guide for staff to take a look at, because the staff don't have a lot of involvement in the fiscal, as far as, if they're filling out a form, they might identify that yes, this person's also a SNAP ENT client, current client. So we can look at a possibility of reimbursement. But what's actually nice about this is they don't need to know all the ins and outs about the financial piece. I do, because I'm putting together those spreadsheets every month. So we keep our current systems, we use our current spreadsheets, we use our current case management software, our current case management philosophy. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, which is why I love this program so much. We're able to tap into all of the existing tools that we already have, and also gain insights from the other providers within the state to help us do our job better. So, we're always evolving. There's always room for growth, and we're always, asking questions and learning from our experiences. And so this has really helped us to be able to develop our program. And we are hoping to do some really new and innovative kinds of things with this program funding. There's just so many possibilities, and it's great to have that discretionary funding available to help our clients and our programs in ways that we can't always tap into otherwise. So those would be like the main points that I would have about this topic area. And I'm open to questions if we have any, unless we want to wait until the end, that's fine too.
Now, Teresa, I think we have a couple minutes if there's a couple quick questions, and then we'll move on to the more general feedback. But thank you so much for sharing. But yeah, if anybody has a quick question for Teresa, I think we could take one right now. Okay, well,
The only other thing I would mention really quickly is that our state just developed a really great marketing video and a flyer that all of the state programs can utilize and tap into. And it's really great information and inspiring for other programs. And so I really think that if you get a chance to check out the Minnesota DHS page, and maybe Steph I just sent it to Steph recently, so maybe she can get an opportunity to pop that into the chat, because it is such a great resource for us. And you might want to check out their website just to see kind of how we're operating and what it all looks like. So I think that could be really useful, making sure that you all are connecting with your own state providers as well to learn more from them.
thank you so much, Teresa. Yeah, I that would be great if we could share the link to the Minnesota DHS. Minnesota definitely is a model program, and you're lucky to have TRICAP as part of your cohort, so you can learn about how they do everything. Definitely great model. I'm going to keep us moving. We have some questions for you all. Okay, I got to there. So if you all remember how to use Slido, either take your mobile device or open up a new browser window. and go to slido.com. You can also just point your mobile device at this QR code and it'll take you right there. You enter the number, the code 381508. I'll type that into the chat also. And answer this question. So we just want to get a sense of what's your confidence level right now after we've done these learning sessions in becoming a Snap ET third-party partner. So just give yourself a rating, like on a scale of 1 to 3. So 1, feeling great, ready to go. 2, might have a few questions still. 3, still feeling like either this isn't an opportunity or you're just a little lost still. Some 1s, we got a 3. Some 2s. Give it just another minute or so to chime in, but it looks like we're getting most everybody responding. Somebody responded, 1 being most confident, and that's due to having matching funds and interpreting what you put there. Yeah, that's a huge piece, right? If you know you have non-federal funds, then this is kind of a no-brainer. This is good for us to just kind of take the temperature of the audience. So we have one more question for you that maybe we'll dive a little deeper into some of the concerns that you still have. So I'm going to move to the next question. So same process. If you're still uncertain about whether Snap ET is a good fit, describe your biggest concerns in a few words. Whether it's around the funding or capacity or service alignment or just knowledge. Tell us what you're feeling. So finding capacity and knowledge, aligning the alignment of your services. Capacity to take on a new project. That's a big one, right? Everybody has a full-time job already. Staffing and funding. Your state doesn't have any community action agencies as ET partners, so you'd be kind of forging this on your own. That's a really valid concern. We can't, alleviate every one of these concerns in this session, but this is really helpful for us as we kind of move into this next phase of your cohort participation, where you'll be receiving some more individualized coaching and kind of getting started in the process. This is really good information for us to kind of help shape the work we do to support you and, maybe address some of these concerns, help alleviate them, help you find ways to get around them if possible. Yeah, just like Steph said, we're all in this together. We're gonna move out of this unless anybody's typing in some last minute thoughts, because we wanna leave some time. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A. And just a couple during that time too, feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions you might have for Teresa or for Steph or for me and Bob. And also there's a couple of things that happened in the chat that might just raise to the whole group. So we'll move on from this. These are resources we put up all the time. The Snap ET program toolkit is a great kind of policy and operational guide for state agencies, but it also is helpful for providers too to understand what the policies, SNAP ET policies are. SNAP to Skills is the TA effort offered by FNS for state agencies to build out their SNAP ET programs. But again, there's a lot of great resources and information that you can use. But I'm going to open it up to Q&A. So feel free to unmute and again, address your questions to anybody who's to Steph, to me and Bob, to Teresa. One thing I was going to note, just that I thought was a great point that you made, Teresa, around budgets and how SNAP ET operates differently from other grants, in that if you are moving through the course of your program year and you're not hitting your targets, you don't have to rush to figure out how you're going to use all this money. You might have some internal like strategic pressure or intent to, and you definitely want to maximize what's available in your contract, but you can also course correct throughout the year. So most programs will give you an opportunity and will appreciate if you go back to your SNAP agency and say, hey, we bit off more than we can chew. This program isn't scaling the way we thought it would for whatever reason. We don't want to hold on to these funds and have them reserved for us if they can be used by other partners in the state. And so state agencies are looking at that strategically too. How might they redistribute available funds within the program year so they can get used up before they're going to renew their state plans? So communicating often with your state agency and tracking your performance is really helpful. And then on the flip side, you might be on the receiving end of extra funds if you're outperforming what you thought you would do. You're serving more people than you anticipated. You're using resources more quickly. There might be opportunities within the program year to increase your contract. So communication is key.
On that note, if I may ask, this is Kathy from Mock in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. What do you recommend in terms of like interfacing the first time with our state agency? Like, has the partnership done any work with them to let them know that we might be contacting them? Like, is there a specific person who we should reach out with who would know what we're talking about if we can't do it very articulately at first?
Absolutely. And you're in Massachusetts, so a kind of another model program. We can definitely provide you with contact information on who to contact in your state. And so, and to your initial question, yes, the states have all been made aware of the fact that there's this project among other cohort based projects with other kind of networked entities happening right now. And so they have a sense of where there's interest in more people becoming providers. And APHSA has done a great job of working with their state agency networks to let them know, hear what they're interested in, what their priorities are, what their concerns are. So yeah, you're not just going to be knocking on doors and they're for them to say what's going on. And in Massachusetts, they definitely have an awareness of this. So Steph, I think we can maybe offline offer some contact info for folks.
Yeah. So next steps, Kathy, we're going to kind of shift into more direct coaching, with everyone in their own state, and then each of you guys individually, if that's kind of how you want to approach it. But we did take a very conservative approach in the beginning, talking with all the states, and these state agencies are the members of APHSA, who's in this with our grant. So they want to make sure their members have a heads up, and we want to make sure they know how great you guys are. So we've definitely made that clear, but they are aware, and a lot of them, especially in Massachusetts, are eager to talk to you all. They want more partners. They've got people that they want to, improve their economic mobility and leave SNAP. So this is a symbiotic relationship. But as we do some coaching, you can get more questions you might have formalized. We'll then have these scheduled meetings with the state, so it can be organized and feel good. There's no wrong question. I know a lot of you, I saw some threes in that Slido. I think the coaching sessions will be invaluable. And then also sort of reiterating that you guys are in really great states, for SNAP ET. There are so many great programs with so much great support, which I think is key. I think you heard Teresa saying that, but yes, it's all, I know, we've been going along, but there has been stuff in the background, and that background stuff was making sure these states are excited to kind of engage.
Kathy, have you had a chance to look at their website? It's called Snap Path to Work.
Yes, I've seen it before. Yep. I just didn't know if there were specific people that we should be, trying to connect with right off the bat versus, just kind of a mainstream channel in. So thank you.
Questions or anybody who did indicate a 3 on their confidence level, if you've no pressure, but if you want to kind of talk about that or elaborate on that, feel free to chime in, or a 1 for that matter.
I think one of the keys too is if you're concerned about your staffing capacity and everything, is to start small. Is to work with maybe one of your programs, and with a small group of people that are in that program, ones are going to be eligible for SNAP and SNAP ET, and do it that way, and just kind of integrate it into your processes and your programs a little at a time.
I would also just kind of want to underscore that the last 4, the 4 webinars we have kind of have just had have that underlining theme of aligning with what you're already doing, leveraging what you're doing. So I'm sure many of you have other federal programs, so just aligning that. You're I think here with us at the cohort because you want to either enter the workforce development arena or expand what you're currently doing to include an ENT program. And so doing that is basically just figuring out how to align with what you're already doing. So it's not, oh my gosh, we have to hire new staff, or because these folks are already in front of you for other reasons. If you could then just say, hey, you're on SNAP, you fit the bill. We have this amazing ENT program in our state, and we can help you with that. Versus, here's a bus ticket. We don't do that here. You'll have to go somewhere else. So just maybe there is some hesitation about, oh wow, like we can't take on a single new thing. Yes, this is a new thing, but it's tucked in with kind of what you're already doing. I would say, which may or may not happen, if anyone has another question or will have a question for us, I may mail you my Huggy Heart pillow. No, there's the carrot. Oh, I see it.
I have a quick one, I think. It's me again.
Yeah, love it.
Sorry. So in trying to kind of ease our fiscal department into this, I've been telling them that it's like the SNAP outreach and enrollment program in terms of the reimbursement. Is that fair and accurate? Do you know?
I think so. I think it's fair. I mean, it's a 50% reimbursement. You have to track certain things, and you have to report certain things to the SNAP agency. So it's similar. I mean, it's going to be based on what you do and who you serve in order to get qualified for that reimbursement.
Kathy, that is true.
And the two programs can work closely together too, because
Mhm.
you know, it's the folks that you are helping to apply for SNAP benefits. You know, you can tell them about SNAP ENT, and you know, you get the services right there. It's fewer handoffs for that individual too, so it's more likely that they're going to be somebody that wants to enroll in the program.
We have the SNAP outreach grant in our, we're one of the SNAP outreach providers. So we do that application assistance piece, and we also have the SNAP employment and training. And so there is a lot of really good reasons why we have both of the programs. And I would say that there's a lot of similarity, definitely, in terms of process, in terms of procedure, all along the way. And it also gives us some access to verify SNAP eligibility in our state. And I know it's different for every state, but it's definitely, there's a strong correlation there. Mhm.
Good, thank you.
Okay. No more questions, or you can always send me questions directly. Kind of next steps, I'm sure you all have seen and we've scheduled some kind of one-to-ones, and then we'll move into coaching, which I think will be invaluable. And then we'll kind of go from there. But thank you all for being here. Like I said, we're in this together. There's no silly questions. I know we're at different you know, points on the spectrum of readiness, but you guys would all make great partners. So let's go make some partnerships. I'll be in touch. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, I'm gonna hit end recording.
All right. Great.